Hello.
Hi.
So before we get started and learn why debutantes can do amazing graffiti, apparently, I'll give a little bit of an introduction to the lady sitting across from me. So Mary John Frank is a choreographer and director who creates work in dance, film, for the web, stage, and on film, all involving dance. She has recently made work for New York City Ballet, Vogue.com, Refinery 29, Bonnaroo, American Apparel, and Sony. She has an MFA in dance from the Tisch School at NYU, but before that spent a lot of time in the film business, which we'll ask her about. And Debutaunt, T-A-U-N-T, is her first immersive work, and it's currently on view at Atelier Roquette, which is in a really cool space in Red Hook that is apparently a converted ice cream factory. And it'll be running on weekends through June 28th. So if you're in New York, definitely go see it. So before we started about Debutaunt, Mary John, could you just give us a little bit of an idea of your background as an artist? Because it's certainly not the traditional go to ballet school, become a dancer, do that for the rest of your life path that so many dancers and choreographers take.
Yes, sure. Thank you. Thanks for being here, guys. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so I grew up dancing, but I was also a gymnast and had a lot of other interests as well. So I wasn't that kid that was in the ballet studio with pink tights doing a ton of tendus. I was sort of the rebellious dancer. I was always looking at the clock in ballet class and kind of coming up with excuses to skip class. But as I got older, dance started to play more of a role in my life, and it was something that I would just do naturally. Like I would get home from school and turn music on and make up dances. Every time I would hear a song, I would, kind of make up a music video in my head. It was just something that came pretty naturally. And I started to pursue it when I was in college, meaning thinking I could, was going to do that for a career path. And I had a lot of body image issues, and just there were things that were in the way, and I took some time away from dance for a while. So right after college, I started working in the film business. That was like my first job as an assistant at Miramax Films back in the Weinstein days when they used to own Miramax Films. And that's when I got into film. And I was an assistant for a couple of years and then worked my way up, moved to Los Angeles, worked at Paramount and Warner Brothers and other film studios, and dance eventually made its way back into my life, and I was able to kind of put aside my own, body image issues and start doing it again for fun. And then eventually, it took over, and I started doing it more full time and looking for freelance opportunities to choreograph and make work, and did that in Los Angeles, and then that's what led me eventually back to New York. And this is a lot of information in the first question, so I hope you guys are still with me.
It was a circuitous path, but you're here now. So was there a specific moment that it occurred to you dance on film was something that you could contribute to and do something original with?
Yes, and I think that contribute to is really the part that interests me. When I started creating work again in Los Angeles, it was after a breakup, and I was really angry, and I started just making up dances to White Stripes songs and like putting them on at random venues in Los Angeles. And actually some of the friends here today saw some of those shows. I'm really embarrassed to say. But I think I started filming the dances that I was creating and noticing how flat things looked when they were on the stage and I was filming them. And so after, I didn't really explore with camera and dance very much until I had the opportunity to make a dance film. A friend of mine encouraged me to do it. He was a great cinematographer. His name is Damien Haran. Y'all should look him up. He's great. He was like, you should make a dance film. And I applied for some grants, and one of them worked out, and made my first film, Einstein's Dance, and that's when I really started exploring with camera movement and choreography. There was a lot of steady cam, so for those of you in the audience who are familiar with filmmaking, like so much steady cam that it was like so much movement, I didn't almost know what to do with it when we were editing. But yeah, that was kind of the first time I got to really focus on camera movement and dance movement. And I don't know, I caught the bug, I guess. And now I can't really imagine doing, I don't know, there's always going to be a cinematic element to the dances I create.
Well, I think that there are obviously specific challenges, like you started to talk about making dance for a camera that you know is going to be seen on a screen. Do you feel like that influenced how you developed as a choreographer too, since it was coming at a moment in your life when you were switching direction too?
Well, right. There's something about also capturing the movement that is appealing to me. Like, I mean, you guys got to, I mean, that was a trailer with not a whole lot of dancing in it, but I mean, if that was a live performance, obviously you would have all missed it. So there is something about capturing the movement and having that documentation and getting to share it with more people that was very appealing to me.
But it doesn't affect your actual process when you're making the movement, or how you're thinking about how it's ultimately going to be seen in a box, sort of.
You know, it does now. I mean, I think when you're doing a live work, your frame is the space. So I think of things now like, I guess, as a filmmaker. So when I'm working on something, I often want to look at it from the side, or if there's the opportunity to look at it from above, I like to do that. So I think that filmmaking has informed my choreographic process, and then I think about different angles because of the way that you would with a camera.
So before we talk about Debutaunt, because I think that some of your style that I'm kind of picking up on emerges there, what would you say are your kind of primary influences for making dance that's going to be on film? Because certainly there's a huge history with that, which could be sort of heavy to deal with. But how would you describe your style to someone who's never seen your dance before?
I think it's contemporary, but I also have a background in musical theater. So there's some structure to it. It's not super abstract. There's usually some sort of narrative or like ending to it, like a beginning and an end. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but I would say contemporary with hints of musical theater. I definitely appreciate theater and like to incorporate that into the movement.
So speaking of theater, doing an immersive work is another step beyond doing dance on stage and then on film, and then something that people are actually going to be moving through and not just seeing in front of them. What was the path that led you to feeling that doing an immersive work, which Debutaunt is, was the right next step for you?
It was a couple of things. I think last summer, a friend of mine who owns a bourbon distillery in the Brooklyn Navy Yard donated the space to me for a weekend. And I just started thinking, okay, what would I want to do in this space? And it didn't make sense to me to do like a staged live work where you were just sitting and watching dance. I thought the space was really beautiful and it would be really nice to kind of get to move through it. And so I started thinking about how could we move through it. And I had, you know, I kind of have a book of ideas of things that I want to make eventually. And Debutaunt was in there. And I thought it would be a really good fit given the bourbon distillery vibe. So that space really influenced the immersive piece of the work. And then we got to perform it last October there. And audiences came, and it seemed like people were, I mean, I think people were interested in it. We had a really good time making it, and from there decided to keep going and keep digging in.
So this idea was in your notebook. Tell us what the sort of idea behind it was, because I'm under the impression it sort of goes into your own personal background as well.
Right. So notebook, yes. Basically, I had seen The Glass Menagerie on Broadway about 1.5 years ago, and the Amanda character, played by Cherry Jones, was wearing. She's so good. Someone mouthed to me in the audience. So good. It was so good. Cherry Jones. There's a scene where she comes down and she's talking to the gentleman caller and her daughter, Laura, and she puts on her old debutante dress. And the way that stage work was, the blocking was really interesting to me. It was very choreographed. It wasn't dance, but it was...
I was going to say movement was a very important part of it. Yeah.
So I just started thinking about debutantes and how that was just something... I haven't seen a lot of work in that world. And I thought, okay, what can I grew up in Texas. I was a debutante. I went through that experience. And even though the show isn't necessarily based on my experience as a debutante, I did think there was something there. I was like, I've got to dig into this a little bit. And so right after seeing that show, I went home for Christmas and I tried on my old debutante dress, which didn't fit anymore, and had to do some weird things to make it fit. And then from there started making a dance in it. And then that led to a short dance film called Lady in Waiting, and it was an experiment. My parents let me make it in their backyard, which is really interesting. And I don't know. From there, I just started thinking, okay, what can I do with this work? And that's when the distillery became available, and that's how it all started.
There's something, I think, fascinating about debutante culture in the South, that it's such an entrenched thing in the South, but it's something that I think is eternally interesting to society. What do you think about it is something that people are just consistently fascinated with?
I'm sort of like afraid of this question, to be honest, because I'm not that fascinated about it. There are a lot of things about it that are obviously very dated, and I think there's some things about it that actually made me really nervous. Like, I'm still nervous to talk about it. I think I'm very conflicted about the whole thing. Like, growing up in Texas, it wasn't so, like, in my community, people, that's what the women did. And going back and like looking at, I went to a debutante ball in April and then another one last fall, you know, to research. And I really realized like it was sort of a coming of age moment, and it was sort of shared between fathers and daughters, and there was a lot of dancing, and, you know, yes, it's extravagant. People got these, you know, wore these beautiful dresses, and, you know, it's a really fancy party, but I don't know, I didn't leave the experience thinking, this is so cool, or this is terrible, or this needs to be extinct now. Like, I just sort of left thinking, okay, interesting, this is bizarre. But in terms of the fascination with it, I don't know, I can't really comment on that. I don't think I'm personally fascinated by it. I think I'm just more, I was just interested in like kind of digging into the themes.
Well, I was going to say that, you know, watching the sort of intros for Debutante, we see that you're working with a few different characters, and to me, that hints at, I think that part of the fascination for me with the whole coming out rituals is that you very much feel you're looking from the outside in at something that you're not a part of, and it has that air of mystery about it. But I think what you hint at with these characters in the piece is that these are young women, and they have personalities, and they're not just these sort of cookie cutters in white dresses. So maybe can you talk to us a little bit about the characters who are in the piece and how it proceeds a bit?
Sure. Yes, so the girls there's 5 main debutantes, and each one represents a different archetype. And those archetypes came from things that, like qualities that I think can be positives, and also things that can hold us back. So there's like the perfectionist control freak who like is super on it, but she's so obsessed with getting things perfect that she kind of misses the experience. The bigger picture. You know, there's the beauty queen who seemingly everything comes very easy to her, and kind of makes the other characters uncomfortable because they're always comparing themselves to her. So all the characters, there's, you know, the rebellious drunken debutante who like doesn't want to be there. There's a girl from the East Coast who's just visiting home, and you know, her storyline's really developed this time around. But yeah, each character represents something that I think I've personally struggled with, or I've spoken to, you know, female friends about as things that hold them back. And so these girls have to learn to sort of deal with their character quirks in order to find their voice by the end. We're trying to accomplish a lot in the show, and by the end they do find their voice.
So, you know, from the perspective of an audience member, what are you sort of moving through as you encounter these characters?
Well, it's structured, the show is structured in the same way a debutante ball in Texas would be structured. So you arrive, you have some drinks, you take some photos, the girls are preparing madly, so this is an exaggeration, this was not my experience, but the girls are really practicing their bows and practicing their dance steps. And then part 2 is the actual debutante ball. So it's sort of a show within a show, and you're seated and you watch the ball unfold. Oh, and I should mention that in the beginning of the show, when you're waiting in line where the graffiti was in the video, you get a bracelet. So you're assigned to a girl, so you're rooting for a girl. So you become part of her family. And that's also the idea, like in part 1 of the show, I don't know, at these Texas debutante balls, you sort of felt like you were 1 degree of separation, sort of like you were connected to everyone, and that's kind of what we like to do. We try to bring people in, and if they don't know each other, introduce them, and the bracelets allow people to feel connected to a deb. So everyone, you know, you root for your debutante during the ball, and then part 3 evolves into a dance party, which is what actually happens at these debutante balls.
Excellent. Sounds like fun.
It's fun.
Anything that ends in a dance party is a good thing. I mean, this must have really been sort of a trip down memory lane for you, which I imagine is fun and difficult in some ways. Was there a research process to, I mean, just even looking at the traditional dance forms that you're sort of integrating into the piece?
I tried to not watch really anything on debutantes. Like, I tried to just sort of gather kind of the essence and create the movement from photographs, like old cotillion-style photographs, and fashion, obviously, like inspired a lot of this. I'm sorry. Would you mind asking the question again? I got a little lost in my process.
I was just wondering if what kind of research was involved, since you're kind of digging into something from your own past and something that has such a long history in itself.
I mean, I did some reading, but again, I tried to stay away from things that had already been created visually, just because I didn't want to copy anything that had been done. So a lot of it was created, again, through images, photographs, fashion, and then with the cast, we did a lot of like improvisation and like asking questions about being a woman and what their experience has been like and being on display. So some of it was really organic, and it didn't really come from a ton of research.
Mm-hmm. I mean, thinking about what it must look like, it doesn't seem like something that would translate to just being straight on stage. It seems like something you really want to be interacting with other people. Did you ever think of it in a different way, or was it always in your mind just something that had to be in this sort of site-specific presentation?
I think the site-specific world is right for this. I think the film that I got to make was interesting, and I would love to explore with it more on film. And I don't know if that means just in the next run of it, raising a little more money and getting to explore with the projection element of it a bit more. But I think, the site-specific thing is good for this particular piece.
And a very important thing is, how is the film integrated into the whole experience?
So the film is integrated. It sort of helps define the world. So we pre-shot a bunch of videos of debutantes doing all different kinds of things. So there's a debutante in a hunting vehicle with a shotgun, because in Texas, like, women are hunting and like also debutantes, and I think that's an interesting. And there's a girl, playing golf in her debutante dress. There's a, so we were just sort of defining the world for you through the videos. We have a video called "The Evolution of a Debutante," and it explains like this one girl sort of, it explains the evolution of a debutante. And then we have photos of each girl that are, blasted on the wall with their names. And so it's just to help define the world for you a bit more. It's more setting the tone and the atmosphere than really contributing to the story.
And giving it a little bit of structure, it sounds like, as well. Interesting. Well, maybe we'll open this up to some questions in the audience now.
Hi.
Hi.
So my question is really around kind of the voice aspect. I think what's one of the amazing things about the show is that you're trying to kind of bring to light the fact that being in a cookie cutter mold in society based on whatever traditions it is not necessarily something that you have to do. Like, you can just be who you are and then, find yourself regardless if, like, the circumstances that you're in, don't allow for it or, like, don't, champion it. So I would just love to know a little bit more about kind of the voice aspect and how you got there and why you think it's so important to, like, really tell this story that has, like, an empowerment element while at the same time kind of like a mockery element to it, too.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm pausing because I don't want to ramble, because I really like the question. Thank you. So I think that as, like, not even as women, but I think as people growing up, we're given a lot of messages that keep us from whether it's pursuing, your creative dream or, reaching out to a person you love, or, there's a lot of things that I think are imposed on us that keep us in fear. And I know that for me, like, going through my 20s, like that, there were a lot of things I was really afraid to do and try, because I had a lot of, my own hang-ups. And I really, with this show, wanted to, I think it's sort of dedicated to, like, the 18-year-old version of me, or people in my life who've shared different, difficulties or things that have kept them from pursuing their their dreams. And I think for me, this was about like through each character, sort of telling a story. That's good. Telling a story of how each girl starts from a place of like fear and then ends up in a place of like courage or bravery. And I think that finishing in the dance party, like the audience gets to sort of have that experience too. It's like you're in this world where everyone's telling you to smile, stand up straight, behave. You know, you're sitting here, you're rooting for this girl. It feels really awkward. This girl's on display, and essentially everyone's like cheering her on for doing this really mundane thing, which is a bow. And then by the end, when the girls break free, I think we all get to have the experience of breaking free a little bit through dance. Does that answer your question? Okay, good. Thanks.
This question is sort of from Periscope.
Oh.
In regards to the performance, is it, you talk about the audience interaction and things like that, is it similar to like an Awesome 80s prom or a Tony and Tina's wedding in the regard that the audience members, do they have any impact or steering of how the production goes?
Well, the audience always has an impact because every night it's a different crowd. So just depending on where the audience is standing in space, like it makes a difference for the performers. But there is not like a winner. Like I think with Awesome 80s Prom, there's a prom king and queen right by the end. And we've addressed that in our with our cast, which is like when they give the bracelets in the beginning, and they're like, "Oh, we're rooting for a girl. Is there going to be a queen?" They're like, "No, all debutantes are winners. We're all this is not a competition, but we just really need your support. We need you to be a cheerleader." So the audience definitely changes things for us based on the questions they ask the characters or where they're actually physically standing in space, but they're not voting or affecting the end of the show in that way.
I think something important this brings up is that immersive theater and immersive performance is such a big thing right now with the shows you mentioned and things like Sleep No More. There's something appealing about it to people, and when you see the audience each night, does it give you a hint about why people are so into this or why it seems to connect with audiences in a special way?
Well, we have a really special cast, and I think that these people are really good at what they do and talented, and I think that they've really been able to connect with audiences, and people get attached to their character and are rooting for them. And I think it's really the cast invites them in and does a really good job with that. So kudos to them. A lot of them are in the back, and I'm really happy they're here. It makes me feel very comfortable. Thanks, guys.
Congratulations, it sounds really cool. I guess my question is, where do you see the show going next? It being a site-specific piece, what would be your hopes for it?
Great, thank you. That's a good question. So the dream is that this run, we get some people there that would be interested in participating in the next run. So I've been working on this with 2 producers who are also friends, and we realized halfway through this production that we really have we're learning as we go. And I think that's a lot of art, you're learning as you go. But we would love to find someone who's done immersive theater before to come on as a producer and a shepherd and help us find our next, venue for this. I think the space is wonderful where we are now, Atelier Roquette in Red Hook. I think it would be really nice to find another warehouse space, something that might be a little closer to Manhattan, just so it's easier for people to come and see. And creatively, I would really like to, again, dig into the film part of it and make that part more immersive versus just sort of setting the background scene or atmosphere. And then, I don't know, I'm going to be working in New Orleans from January through May, and part of me thinks this could be really interesting in the South, too. So I'm exploring that as well. Like an old mansion in the South could be a good spot for this. Yeah.
I support that. I think that would be amazing.
Hey.
Hi.
Do you personally identify with any specific one of the Debs, or is there a little bit of you in all of them?
I definitely identify with all of them, and when you come and see the show, which I hope you guys will, this is an embarrassing thing to say out loud, because they're all pretty wild and awesome, but there's a lot of, rebellion and, again, character quirks are calling them that come up, but I relate to all of them.
We have time for one more question.
Hello. I don't understand, historically, the purpose of these balls. Was it that the girls were put on display so that some rich tycoon would almost like purchase them?
Kind of. It was to essentially marry women off. And that obviously has changed over time. But that's a big theme in the show. It's actually the space that we're doing it in is a venue for weddings. Both venues have been. So it's been interesting doing it in this. I would say one of our lead characters, her escort doesn't show up. So she's forced to do the whole debutante thing by herself. And it used to be the tradition behind debutante balls was to present women to society so they could be married off. We're not promoting that message. The opposite.
On that happy note, I guess that's it. But thank you so much for coming, and thank you, Mary John.